you know that there weren't 2 towers that fell on September 11th, that there was 3? There was 3 massive buildings.
Jones is a 20-year physics professor at BYU who's penned an academic paper raising another hypothesis: explosives pre-positioned in the building.
At one point, he told me he had contacts in the federal government. He said, I can get you shut down. And he said, I can end your career. I do think this guy had a lot to do with it, but not alone, obviously.
These are the days that Daniel saw. These are the days that John saw and wrote about. These are the days. These are the end times. These are the wars and rumors of wars days. Welcome into Zion Media. We've got a doozy for you today. I'm personally very excited about this one, and it is May 2nd here in the United States of America, and I guess in the entire world. Maybe not in China, but apparently Dave just says we just got a trade deal done. Just came hot off the news press. Hopefully that's good news for tariffs. But we're in a wild time, and we are all just white knuckling it here in current events. And we are excited to have on a very prestigious guest is Dr. Stephen Jones, who many of you guys may have heard of. And if not, we're going to get into who he is and a fascinating backstory. And all of this ties in to 9/11. And so we're going to get into some interesting finds that Dr. Jones discovered while working at BYU as a professor and running some analysis of rubble in the dirt with no agenda, and discovered something quite interesting that made him scratch his head and say, why would this be in the rubble at 9/11? This is suspicious. How did this get in here? Wrote a peer-reviewed article. With anyone who's in academia knows that that's part of the science, is publishing these peer-reviewed articles, which is extremely difficult and onerous, and has to be, then it goes into a peer review where you have all these academics on a national and worldwide level that can get access to these publications and look at them and scrutinize them. And that is the value of science, is this peer review process where it's like, well, did you think about this? Well, did you look at this? I don't know about this. And the peer review got incredible reviews. And we're going to talk about the story of what happened after that, some unfortunate things and pressures that happened to him. We're going to talk about the media, the news media, and how they're complicit in holding up whatever truths they determine to be truth. So welcome to the show, Dr. Stephen Jones, and I'm joined here by David the Lion Douglas, Latter-day Chad, and Greg the Real MacGyver. Shane is on his way to South Carolina on a 3-day journey with his son, driving out there because we have a office that is opening up with one of Shane and I's companies. And it's big, crazy, busy times. So Shane and I are going to be quite busy the next couple of weeks. We've got a bunch of videos that we've recorded that are in the can, as we call them. This will be one of them. And then after mid-May, you'll start to see both of us back on here more regularly. Dave, Chad, MacGyver are going to take over a lot of the daily recordings. And we're just going to keep cranking out content here at Zion Media. We appreciate all the feedback that you guys give us on shows and guests. We've had Dr. Stephen Jones recommended, I think, dozens of times, at least over a dozen times. I moderate a lot of comments. And so Welcome to the show, Dr. Jones. Let's start off talking about who you are. Are you a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, convert, born into it, and kind of give us a little bit of your story growing up to about September 11th timeframe.
Wait a second. Wait a second. Trevor, you've got to say the Dr. Jones like you did
Oh, yeah.
earlier.
Dr.
You got to
Jones,
say that.
Dr. Jones.
I
And
used
I
to,
always
so when I was teaching physics at BYU and also physical science, I would dress up as Dr. Jones, Indiana Jones. I had a whip. I actually had a fedora, and I
yes.
would come into class right at the start of class. I wait till the bell rang, and then I'd run in with my fedora and my whip and a pistol, by the way, too. That was a cap gun.
Couldn't get away
Probably
with that
illegal
today.
today, but it was
Yeah,
something I had fun with. And I would run in and crack the whip, and this is close to Halloween, so we would have some fun doing that. Okay, so yes, I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I might say I've served as a bishop twice, once in Provo, BYU 99th Ward, and once here in Missouri, where we now live. In it's called the Three Forks Ward. This is the Three Forks of the Grand River, which Grand River flows from our area here, not too far from my house, down to Adam-on-Diamond and through Adam-on-Diamond.
no kidding. How close are you to Adam-on-Diamond?
We call it AOA here typically.
I was going to
And
say AOA, but I figured
you're
people would.
fine. I got that. 26 miles as the crow flies from my house. And so, yeah, pretty close. And we love to go down there. My wife and I, my wife's somewhat handicapped now, but we used to go down there often, particularly when the temple was closed. We would go down to Adam-on-Diamond and enjoy the spirit there. There is a dedicated temple site at AOA, as you probably know.
It's beautiful. I have a question about AOA. This is pop trivia since you live down there.
Go for it.
Chad and David know about this. We were staying at the Morel Ranch,
Yes.
and they told us that there is a guy who lives in a cave in between the Morel Ranch and Adam-on-Diamond and the river, who lives in a cave with his son, and he believes that he's Joseph Smith reincarnated and his son is Jesus Christ. And they've been living in that cave for like 12 years. Do you
Yeah.
know about this?
I have not heard of that. I'm not saying it's not true, but that's news to me. I will
All
tell you a true story, though,
right.
while we're on it, because I mean, it's up to date. So in 20, let's see, I think there's just, while we're talking about AOA, I got to throw this in. So it has to do with President Nelson. So he was recently made prophet, and let's see, I want to get the date. Yes, 2018, right. So I was a bishop here in the Three Forks Ward. And we heard from the AOA missionaries this story. Now, what it is AOA missionaries, we had about 20 of them that came to our ward. They were assigned to our ward, which was great, helping, with primary and all sorts of things, and just really a blessing in our ward. Anyway, Sister Graybill told my wife and I this story. So, true story. And so what it was is they had these 70s who were assigned to AOA coming to visit. This is summer of 2018. Yes, so I was the bishop that time. And anyway, they also had a guest coming with the two 70s who were assigned to AOA. So there was no indication of the name of the guest, but the menu was specified. This brother wanted a salad, no meat, and a certain way of preparing the salad. Well, you might guess that's President Nelson. And sure enough, so here President Nelson comes and he talks to the AOA missionaries. And he told them this. He said, I understand that there's going to be Now this obviously is third hand, so it's not an exact quote, but this is what he told them. He said, "I understand there's going to be a meeting here, an important meeting at this site, Adam-on-Dayaman." And he said, "And I might actually be hosting that meeting. I might be asked to host that meeting." So he said, "I thought I'd better come and check it out." So I thought that was pretty exciting. It's 2018, and yeah, so we're excited to live in this area. Now, let me go back, Trevor, because you asked me to trace back a bit. So I was born under the covenant. No, I take this. Sorry. I have to back up on that. Oh my goodness.
You
My
were a
children were
common
born under the
baby.
covenant, but I was not. My dad used to say, he said they wouldn't let me go on a mission. And I said, "Why is that, Dad?" And he said, "Because I wasn't a member yet." So my dad joined the church, and after he joined, we went to the Logan Temple, where I was sealed to my parents when I was about 4. And I have just slight memories of that, dressed in white, in the Logan Temple. That
Okay,
was it.
nice. My great grandfather was Mariner Wood Merrill, and he lived in that temple as they were building it, and was the mission president or the temple president.
Yeah, great temple, beautiful. And so I was born in Pocatello, Idaho, but my folks moved quickly to San Diego, California. I spent a little time there, and then they moved to Seattle, actually Bellevue, Washington, and that's where I grew up.
Okay.
And Bellevue High School, I was one of about 10 active members of the church in the high school. It's a pretty big high school too.
Yeah.
So, I was running cross country. You wouldn't believe that now, but I still do get out and run a little bit, even at my old age. But I love to run. So anyway, from Bellevue, my folks moved to Southern California again, and after high school, I went
Served a
down.
mission.
Served a mission. So now we're in Southern California after high school, and then I go to BYU, and from there I served a mission. That is, after 1 year at BYU, I served a mission, France, Belgium
Oh, nice.
mission. And I just have to throw in right now, later in life. Now I'm going to mention this. So my wife was planning, she became my wife, was planning to go on a mission when I met her in Tennessee. At that point, I was at graduate school. I managed to get through BYU without getting married.
Wow. Good job.
Yeah, accomplishment there. Anyway, so I'm at Vanderbilt University, also at Stanford University, doing graduate work. But it was in Tennessee where I met my wife, and she was a convert, and she was planning to go on a mission. And I went to the stake president after we dated a while, and I said, President Brady, and I said, "Look, I know Leslie's planning a mission, but I'd like to get married. I don't want to wait." He said, "You don't have to wait. You just go right ahead." She'll serve a mission raising the kids, our children, which we have 7 children now.
Wow.
But you see, in addition, Leslie and I went on a mission to New Jersey, 2016, 2017.
Okay. What part?
We were in the Morristown, New Jersey mission. So it's really basically the north half of New Jersey. Basically from Tom's River up to, actually went into New York a little bit, New York State.
Yeah.
So, we're going to the New York Temple. That's quite an experience. And we were stationed in the inner city. So different from
Yeah.
any
So
other
you're
experience.
talking about the Manhattan Temple there that's on the
Yes.
Upper West Side?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love
my
that.
my parents served a mission at the United Nations for
Oh,
other
really? Yeah.
charities, but they lived in the same building as the temple. The church has a lease in that building, and they house a bunch of people, and so they were living in the same building,
Really?
temple.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I stayed there a few times.
Yeah. quite a building, and we would get there mostly by we'd take the train and then the subway. And where you get out of the subway, it's just right across the street from the
Yeah.
temple. Great. That was exciting for my wife and I. And let's see, so we skipped a bit there between one mission and the other mission.
So,
In
so
between,
here's a good sequitur. How did you
go
get
for it.
to BYU? Because that'll kind of shrink the timeline
Yeah,
to this this subject.
sure. Okay, so getting to BYU. So let's see. After graduate school, I did postdoctoral work at Cornell University and mostly at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Oh wow.
And so, and then I had a job at the Idaho, it's called the Idaho National Laboratory. At the time, it was Idaho National Engineering Laboratory. Well, I came up with an experiment, which it's an, I think of it, developing an experiment from scratch. That's an invention, right? That's the way I look at it. So anyway, I invented this experiment to do what's called muon catalyzed fusion, which, by the way, that was published in Scientific American
Oh
and
cool.
Nature and Physical Review Letters, top journal. And after I got to BYU, but anyway, that was basically my ticket to BYU. Is I had this experiment, and I was the head investigator for the experiment, and it was back at Los Alamos at the Maison Physics facility, which is where we had the muons, which we used for the experiment. Just such a fun experiment, and it's so close to energy. I mean, I know Heavenly Father has a sense of humor, but in this case, the energy production missed by a factor of 4 from commercial energy. A factor of 4. I mean, why couldn't it have been, 4,000
Right.
or maybe go the other way? But we could not bridge that gap of 4. And we tried, and
Do
we
you
just had a
think
lot of fun.
this is an interesting topic for me? I am
Yeah,
fascinated
fusion.
in
It's fusion.
fusion. In fusion, I'm absolutely fascinated. I've read every single thing about what happened in the University of Utah. I have my own theory
Okay,
of what's going on. There's, as you know, right now there are three highly funded private companies on the cusp of reaching fusion.
that's right. Now, see,
Wait,
what you just talked about there, let's see, that's Trevor, right?
yeah,
What you just talked about was 3 different kinds of fusion. They're all
right,
fusion. Okay, fusion is the joining together of hydrogen, or anyway, not light nuclei, generally isotopes of hydrogen. We use deuterium and tritium and join those together in our
Mm.
experiment. But and we that's where we got this factor of 4 almost to uh, energy. We passed scientific break even, by the way, long
wow,
before anybody else did. But we couldn't bridge the commercial break even uh, level. But what I want, just real quickly, because I love fusion also, I'm with you on that. So there's basically 3 kinds of fusion: hot fusion, thermonuclear, which is what's going on in the sun,
right,
and these laboratories that you mentioned these days, that's where they're working. And you see announcements every few weeks, right?
yeah,
Canada did this, and I don't know, China, or was it? I think it was China.
Yeah, I saw that with
Yeah,
China like making an artificial sun. It's
yeah,
interesting because um I'm like listening to this and it sounds like Spider-Man 2, how Doc Ock is trying to get this fusion thing and he's making this artificial sun and he's talking about the precious tritium and all. So that's what
right.
I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I love that all this going on. But that's all hot fusion. And then the second category would be muon catalyzed fusion, which is this elementary particle. It's a heavy cousin of the electron, and it holds the deuteron and the triton close together because it makes a molecule, and it's so
doesn't it?
heavy.
Don't you essentially replace the electron with
Yeah,
this neuron? Isn't that
with
what
the
happens?
muon. That's right, exactly. And so you get this molecule with a muon, and they're oscillating like this in this tiny little molecule, and they slip through the Coulomb barrier. It's called a barrier penetration, and you get fusion, right? So that's muon catalyzed fusion. And the third type of fusion, which I think you alluded to also, Trevor, is cold fusion.
Cold fusion.
Cold fusion.
That's that's the one everybody wants.
Basically, I called it electron catalyzed fusion back in 19. A friend of mine, a physicist friend of mine, and I wrote a paper on that. We had this idea that this type of fusion might be going on in the planet Jupiter, in the core of Jupiter, which is metallic. And so we're talking about fusion in metals, and we led to experiments independent of the guys at University of Utah. But boy, that's a mess. I mean, historically, it got so confused with their approach. But ours was independent, and ours has been verified, which is very low level cold fusion, but it's been verified. It does work.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so
that's a whole other story. We're
let's bring us
on a
back. So
tangent.
all of you guys who are here to hear about 9/11,
Yeah,
just you know where it's coming here soon. So
yeah.
you get to
I do all
BYU
this
because
stuff. Yeah, I love all
you
fusion.
create
It's
this
great.
experiment, and if I'm hearing you right, Stephen, you create this experiment, it goes well, and then somehow
Oh,
you
yeah, back to BYU. So in 1985, I'd already published in Physical Review Letters, which is a premier physics journal, and I was first author on this paper because I invented the experiment and we did it. I mean, obviously, as a team, as a great group of guys. There's some stories about that too, because we had some difficulty getting Los Alamos to agree to let us do the experiment. It's dangerous, for one thing. We're using deuterium and tritium in this cylinder, and it's dangerous, high pressure, tritium, radioactive stuff. Anyway, long story short, BYU had an opening. My wife saw that in church news, I think, and I was interviewed by BYU and hired. So I started at BYU September August really of 1985, and our Scientific American article on this subject, muon catalyzed fusion, was published in 1987. So that got me in to the door of BYU. Um,
so way back, late 87, is that what you said?
yeah, 87 was the publication. 85 is when I went to BYU.
Okay. I didn't realize you'd been there that long. So by the
I'm
time
old, I
we're going
tell
to
you.
get to, you're there 30 years?
Well, let's see. I was early retired,
Okay.
is a polite way to put it, in 2007. So 85 to '07 is almost 22 years.
Okay, 22 years. Wow, that's quite a bit of time. Okay, so let's jump now into what happened at BYU that took you from just the regular guy who's messing around with radioactive isotopes and doing your science experiments and trying to create cold fusion.
Right.
You stumble upon an idea, an experiment,
All right.
and
Let me back up because that
So
experiment you're talking
is
about.
this the 9/11 stuff
yeah.
Now
then, or
we're getting into 9/11 now.
okay?
I did
Before we
some
go
other
into the
things.
9/11, there's just something I've noticed that has been like standing out to me this entire time that I wanted to point out to you all. The Jesus behind Steven looks a lot like Ryan Gosling. I don't know if it's just me, but like I've been looking at this guy the whole
Yeah,
time and it's like that looks like
it
Ryan
does.
Gosling.
It definitely is.
I
I'm
hadn't
really
thought that.
glad. I'm really glad you
I think
pointed that
you've got
out.
a good point there, Chad. It's pertinent and
Yeah, thank you, Chad. All of our viewers are like, somebody had to say it. Somebody had.
someone had to say it. Okay. So we're getting back to the thick of things now, right? With
Yeah.
9/11 research. So here's what happened. This was in the spring of '05, 2005. Okay. I have served as a bishop at BYU Ward. Um, I'm at the peak of my career. I'm doing, muon catalyzed fusion, had had pretty much dried up, but we're just getting into cold fusion, which is what I call electron catalyzed fusion. And boy, just having so much fun working with students. And by the way, we're doing other experiments too, which would be so fun to talk about, like the traces of gold in the box where Joseph Smith kept the gold plates. Did you know that we were preparing to do that experiment to look for traces of gold in the very box where Joseph kept the plates
No
Amazing.
with
kidding.
the approval of Elder G. Smith, who owned the box. I mean, all of this, but I have to tell you that stopped because they threw me out of BYU. So
Wow. Did anyone ever do that?
no, it was all prepared. We were marching along. The students were excited. I was excited. We had a team of students at this stage, and we were looking for how we can measure gold when you just rub it on wood, right? Yeah, you can do that. And we proved that you can do it we were using a proton induced X-ray emission, also X-ray fluorescence methods. And we were getting ready for this. We were geared up. I was in communication with this patriarch to the church, if you remember, Elder G. Smith, just a wonderful man on, letters back and forth. And he said, yeah, go for it. He required it be done at BYU. I'm off on a tangent again. But I just want to say that it was an exciting time in my life, and I was just loving teaching and researching and Book of Mormon research. I was doing some equus, that is horse bones, during the Book of Mormon time frame, looking for those horse bones in America using advanced techniques, accelerator mass spectrometry. Anyway, all of that was going on, and unfortunately came to an end. So here's what happened,
Yeah.
which saddened me, no end. But anyway, what happened was uh, I went to this conference with my wife, and one of the speakers was Sarah Monet, and she was talking about something, I don't remember what, but she paused in her talk and she said, if you think that those twin towers at the World Trade Center came down on 9/11 because of planes, if you think that's what brought those down, you're going to be majorly surprised. And everybody in the audience, I mean, most everybody's clapping and yeah, we're with you on that. And I'm saying, what in the world is she talking about? I did not, I was not clued in. So I decided, and here's the thing, I decided to look, right? Because I'm a curious kind of a guy and I like truth, and I decided to look. So there on YouTube, you've got videos of the towers coming down. And in particular, World Trade Center 7 was available, which we'll show the clip of later, I understand. Anyway, World Trade Center 7 was unique because it was not hit by a plane. And it came down in the afternoon, about 5:20 p.m., right, long after the towers had come down. But it came down in a similar way, and that is straight down, accelerated motion onto the footprint of the building. I mean, how does this happen? And by the way, it's the only time fire, supposedly, allegedly, fire caused an entire collapse of a steel frame building. It has never happened before or since, right?
Yeah.
Three on one day. Oh, come on.
So
And
you
I'm sitting there,
you
oh, come on. Oh, no. And
so
I
tell me if this is accurate assessment. So you're a scientist, right?
yeah,
So you think of things, logically and through the
yeah,
scientific method
experimentally.
and model, right? And
Ah,
you're hearing this and you start to look into it. And what I'm hearing
yeah,
you saying is you're discovering some
it's
how
accelerated
some
motion.
yeah,
It's accelerated. I know about acceleration, from physics.
and so I want to dumb this down a little bit for some of our viewers that this might be the first time that you've heard this. I'm dating someone, and last night I was telling her about this podcast, and I asked her, I said, I said, did you know that there weren't 2 towers that fell on September 11th, that there was 3? There was 3 massive buildings that
Skyscrapers.
fell, skyscrapers. And she's like, what? I'm like, you didn't know this? And she's like, no. I'm like, yeah, there was
That's right.
there was building 1, building 2, and then there was Tower 7, which was part of the exact same complex.
It's part of the complex,
Yes, it's part
but
of the
it
exact
was
same
not hit
complex.
by a plane, so.
And then I told her, and I said, and do you want to know the crazy thing about it? Nothing hit it. There was no plane that hit it. There was no bomb that went off inside of it, and it
Well,
fell. Well,
Well,
officially, yes,
there might have been a bomb
officially,
that went off inside it.
no bomb.
it fell. I'm trying to get my hands perfectly, and that's what Dr.
That's
Jones is
right.
talking about here. Is this building that wasn't hit by a plane, that didn't have a bomb inside of it, according to the official narrative, whatever. It
Right, right.
fell like a pancake, and there are videos online, hundreds of them, and they keep getting moved off of YouTube. You can
Yeah.
find them
Oh, yeah.
on different video platforms, but there's videos of other buildings that have controlled demolition, and it
Right, right.
shows the pattern of them
They
falling.
accelerate. With controlled demolition, you get accelerated motion. That's
Yes.
exactly right.
And the reason why this
Yeah.
is because a building that free falls as it hits the next level, it stops it a little bit, right?
Slows
So
it down.
it has a slower down motion, but when it's exploded, it accelerates it, and they can video time it and say, "Wait a minute." And
That's
so
right.
there is a large group of architects and engineers that
Right.
have formed a group, and these are very prestigious architects and engineers that have
True.
gone in and built their own simulations and their CAD programs and in CATIA, and they're like,
Yeah.
the hypotenuse doesn't conform with my theories, right? And they're saying this official 9/11 thing
Hypothesis.
is not it's not what it is. Okay,
The
so
official story is that fire brought these 3 towers down on the same day. Steel frame buildings. Fire brought
so
them down. Now, there was some
okay,
fire in Building 7, but it was basically going out by the time it collapsed.
and I'm gonna show
Oh, man.
videos, and I can see the emotion in your heart that starts
Ah,
to swell as comes out. And what I want to
I
ask you to do before you jump into all these other things, I want you to tell us about the experiment. So you went from waking up to this idea to I want to investigate the dirt, or what
yeah,
happened?
the dust.
The dust.
Yeah. So, my synapses are firing because there's so many avenues we could go down on this. I guess you call it a rabbit hole, though, right? Because it's like forbidden to talk
Yeah.
about that. Maybe it was something besides Al Qaeda involved here, and
All
my
right.
son,
Hey, hold your theories.
so many
Get into
synapses
the
going.
science. Show me. Here's what I'm going to do to help you out. I'm going to show this
Oh,
channel.
show the clip. Oh,
Okay.
here's Building 7. Yeah.
World Trade Center 7 on 9/11. Watch the free fall acceleration of the collapse. Look at that again, especially this corner. Straight down, free fall acceleration for about 8 floors.
This is actually a clip of Channel 2 News in Utah talking about your scientific thing. And I want you still, before we talk about who done it, I want you to tell us about your experiment and what you did
Yeah.
and what you found.
We did several, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear stunning statements from a BYU professor tonight regarding 9/11. He thinks planes alone did not bring down the World Trade Center towers. Both towers collapsed in place after terrorist attacks, and later that day, World Trade number 7, which was never hit by a plane, fell in less than 7 seconds. Brian Malecki spoke to the professor today and joins us from the roof of the Wells Fargo Center. A crazy theory, Brian, or any validity to this?
Well, Professor Stephen Jones got an email today asking, are you some kind of nutcase? And actually, he's written an academic paper for peer review. It's been well received, he says, among his colleagues at BYU, and it is essentially this. The buildings fell on September 11th, not from planes, but from explosives that were intentionally set.
Images seared in our minds. We saw the planes hit, the explosions and fire, so hot, fortress towers could not stand. Stephen Jones says, not so fast.
Look at that
They're
young guy.
sticking with this one hypothesis. It's almost they have blinders on. It's got to be fires and damage.
Jones is a 20-year physics professor at BYU who's penned an academic paper raising another hypothesis: explosives pre-positioned in the buildings.
Notice how it's straight down.
Especially intriguing to Jones, World Trade Center number 7, damaged and ablaze from tower debris, but never hit by a plane.
Symmetrically now, it doesn't topple over as you might expect from what we call the second law of thermodynamics. It comes straight down. This is the goal of pre-positioned explosives in a controlled demolition.
If explosives detonated like these, if they did, it begs the question, who set the explosives?
Sure. And I try not to go there too much because we have to answer the first question first, the scientific issue first. We need to consider all options for the collapse of these buildings. Let the chips fall where they may.
Jones says that models conducted in tests since 9/11 have not been able to duplicate what happened to the buildings. He is not saying that this is a proven theory. He says, in fact, that it's a hypothesis, but he wants a fresh, new, independent investigation. Mark, back to you.
Thank you for watching this episode on Zion Media. And I'm actually here to let you know that we have a sponsor. It's Oracle Code. Now, you've heard us talking about Oracle Code a couple times. It's an algorithm and application that we're actually designing. And it actually tells you not only a little bit about yourself, but we've been able to adjust this algorithm or this app in a way that allows us to make a song for people. And some of the responses that we're getting is that this song is almost like a patriarchal song, because when people see what their Oracle code says about them, they say it's like, whoa, that's like my patriarchal blessing, or like a special message just for me. And then when we make a song out of it, it makes it even more unique and more attuned to who you are and your purpose here on life. And so really excited about that. The way you get access to your Oracle code and song is by go ahead and using the QR code that's on screen or going in the link in the description and filling out the form so that way you can be able to get your own Oracle code. I'm really excited to be able to be a part of this transformation and this blessing in people's lives. And I look forward to hearing what your Oracle code says about you today.
Okay. So
Nice clip. That's
I have
nice.
a little pop quiz for Chad, David, and MacGyver. Let's see who can get the highest, because I know Dr. Jones will know the answer to this. How hot is the hottest? Okay, you guys know Nephi was a forger of steel, right? In fact, his brothers were jealous of him because of his craftiness, right? And you would have to get a bellow to melt down steel, right? So how hot is the hottest that a house can get to in order, if a house is on fire or a building's on fire, even with gasoline, just like filling the entire house full of gasoline, how hot can it get? And before you answer that, I want to tell you how hot forged steel melts at. Forged steel melts at 2,500 to 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. In other words, it is impossible, even if you have a fire burning for 3 months, to melt forged steel unless it reaches 2,500 to 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. So how hot is the hottest, even with gasoline filling an open flame, can it get without a bellow or some sort of process? You guys want to guess?
I only could guess with my Samuel and my GPT.
Okay. Dad?
Hmm.
2,500
I'm trying to
melts.
think
Is it?
without
You
a
would think it has to be
bellow.
at least 2,500, right?
Yeah, to
I
melt.
think isn't it 1,100 Celsius?
Yeah,
That's the minimum. I don't know if that's
that's
Celsius,
actually
Fahrenheit.
for a typical house. My
Can you
GPT
hear me?
told
I
the
think my
same
headphones
thing.
cut out.
No,
Yeah, keep going, David. David did the GPT work, so tell us what it says, David.
Yeah, so for a typical house, it's actually 600 degrees Celsius up to 1,100, degrees, maybe even up to like, I guess that's 2000 Fahrenheit. I did look at metals because that's what I was asking first. And for certain types of metals like titanium, it's like over 3000. I don't know what kind of metal the towers would have been.
Forged steel.
Steel.
Steel?
Forged steel.
Oh, yeah. 1300 to 1500 degrees Celsius to melt.
Celsius.
Just to melt. Yeah, and just to melt it.
Okay, now let
You
me.
want to know something I find really bizarre? Is that whenever things like this are brought up, there are so many members of the church who are just like, oh, this is all like conspiracy nonsense. It's like, the only reason I'm a member of the church is because I believe in conspiracies. And I started like seeing these conspiracies about weird artifacts found in the Americas and Michigan relics and Hebrew artifacts. There like nobody knows this, but another thing BYU did a study on was that there were these metal plates supposedly found in a cave, and they carbon dated the box that was found in these Brewers Cave plates and
So
said it was like 400 AD or
what,
something. It has
what Chad is saying,
cuneiform.
he's saying that the Heartland theory is what made him active in the church.
I,
It
I
actually
gotta
is.
I gotta say something, Chad. Who did the radiocarbon dating on the bark that held the Brewer Cave plates? Who did the radiocarbon dating on the bark?
Please
Was
tell
it
me it
you?
was you.
It
Please tell
was me. I did the dating, and I
Do you
published the paper on this.
What the heck?
okay? Do you have
That's
any idea
true,
what
and he's
happened to
right.
those things?
The date came out to 50 BC, plus or minus. There's an error bar, but it's the time of Alma. That was the date on the bark, and that was, by the way, with the permission of the owner of the plates, which is the wife of Chessman. Yeah, is Dr. Chessman. He passed away, but his wife gave us permission to get in and get a sample of the bark. We have to go inside. You don't want the part exposed to the air. You want to go inside deep where it's protected, right?
That's a whole
Yeah,
Yeah.
nother episode right there.
And
it's another
the
episode.
the point I was making is
I
the
see. I
Book
have
of
fun.
Mormon.
So,
If you've actually read it, which I feel like a lot of people who are members of the church haven't, especially the Book of Ether and the Book of Moroni, talks about explicitly conspiracies. Ether 9
oh yeah,
is like
Easter
he
eight,
literally, yeah,
eight,
Ether
and
8,
yeah,
Ether 8, Ether 9, he literally like breaks the fourth wall, talks to us and says, in the last days, there are going to be these secret combinations who conspire
that's right.
against you and serve the devil. And I'm like, I don't, I'm my conversion process. I'm like not wanting to believe the Book of Mormon's legit. I'm against it. I'm seeing these Brewer Cave plates. I'm seeing like
That's
there's metal plates being found in America. There's Hebrew artifacts, and museums admit some of this stuff is real. We're actually doing a documentary on some of this stuff that we're working on, and we're getting some guests, and we're gonna go in the back of museums. It's gonna be really cool. But this stuff, it's like, okay, no way this is real. And I look
yeah,
into it, it's like, holy crap. And then
how
the Book of
about
Mormon warns
the
about this.
how
yeah.
Not
about
only
the part where
Synapses
I
firing.
believe it's Mormon, it might be Moroni, and he breaks the narrative like you're saying, Chad, and he says, "And I see your day, and
Yeah,
they are amongst you."
yeah.
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
not only that,
That
That's
That's where we are today.
oh
not
yeah.
only
not
that, but
only.
if you study history from the beginning of
Yeah,
Cain and Abel, that was conspiracy to get Abel's stuff, and all the way throughout all history, Roman, Greek, you just have
right.
conspiracy upon conspiracy.
That's right.
You guys know the first conspiracy ever made was in the War in Heaven when the third decided to dissent
Mhm,
and pull away. That was
mhm.
the first
Yeah,
conspiracy, and we are in the thick of it. Okay, so bringing this thing back full circle, you're at BYU like we showed on this Channel 5
yeah.
episode,
That
and
was a
you
good clip. I
it
like
was
that.
a good clip, huh? I was happy on that. And those guys, if you grow up in Utah, you're used to those people on the news. If you watch Channel 2, that's who you watched. I watched Channel 5, so I didn't see those guys as much. I know them. So you get a box of this material and you run a scientific test. And what you found, just to shrink some timeline, is you found some material in there that should not be in there. and I'm not scientific, but it was nanothermite, essentially,
Right.
or elements that are comprised in nanothermite.
Yeah.
And thermite is not an explosive. It essentially melts
Incendiary.
concrete, steel, it disintegrates, right?
It's an incendiary. So thermite is an incendiary, we call it. Very high temperature. So you've got um, typically in thermite. So there's thermite and nanothermite, and we observed evidence for both of those in the 9/11 towers destruction. Now, both of these involve um, an oxidizer, which is typically iron oxide, and then you've got aluminum, which picks up the oxygen. And in that reaction, iron oxide plus aluminum gives you aluminum oxide plus iron, molten iron. Very high temperature reaction, right? As you mentioned, 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit are in that category to melt the iron. So you're getting from this, you can then melt steel structures in the buildings with the thermite, and
The thermite reaction is 4,500
it's
degrees
very
Fahrenheit,
high. It's so
4,500, and they
it's
use
white
it
hot.
all the time. They
Yeah,
use it all the time to clip metal beams, like just looks
you
like a
can do that,
sword went through them.
right? And nanothermite is a very fine particles of the thermite, so that allows you to proceed with explosive force. And we found evidence for thermite and nanothermite, in particular in the dust. Yeah, that was another discovery. You know, as I was looking through the dust, I noticed these strange reddish particles that would be attracted by a magnet. Now, why I was using a magnet, I don't know. Sometimes the Lord just, I don't know, gives you hints or nudges or something, right? I was using a magnet to pull stuff out of the World Trade Center dust, which I had samples. We have the provenience is well established. Anyway, I was using a magnet to pull in a plastic bag, by the way, so that wouldn't contaminate things. But I pulled out these little red gray chips that were magnetic and analyzed those, optical microscopy and then electron microscopy. And oh boy, we also did.
What were they?
Oh, this was nanothermite material. We
The red,
verified
the
that.
red gray
Well,
wasn't it?
we put them in a calorimeter. It's called a scanning. What's the full term? Scanning differential calorimeter. Differential scanning calorimeter. Anyway, this so the temperature is going higher and higher and higher. At a certain point, the nanothermite actually explodes. I mean,
Now, is
the
this
reaction is so fast.
aluminum? Is this aluminum, magnesium? Because other things like
Aluminum,
magnesium and boron and different
what
things
we
can be
found,
used, right?
you can, but it was iron oxide and aluminum, very fine particles to get the
Which,
nanothermite. Very
which,
simple reaction, but very effective. Very effective.
yeah, and very controlled.
Yeah.
Um,
And let me
very
tell you
controlled.
something. It's controlled, yes. Beyond that, the nanothermite takes high tech. It's not something you and I could just go make. We can do
Okay,
thermite. That's easy. You can buy thermite on eBay. Used to be able to. But nanothermite, now you're talking about national lab, military grade, high tech.
I've heard
This
people
is
say
not
that
Al
there's
Qaeda. So I
only
had to throw that in. It's not Al Qaeda making nanothermite. Okay.
that's where I was heading with this is it's controlled, meaning that there are databases, just like there's databases of people that are going and buying too much Sudafed, they get flagged and being like, this is too much Sudafed. This guy's building a meth lab. There's the same type of databases that are people that are pulling these type of substances together at a scale that you would need. You could track that. It's highly controlled. But nanothermite, my understanding is there's only 6 countries that have admitted being able to even produce it. Countries.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think you're right. Yeah, and when we were looking at it, so this was back in the 2000s, right? Early 2000s. We were I mean, 2007, 8, 9, right in there. We published in 2009 on the nanothermite in a peer-reviewed paper, as you mentioned. But you're right. The places where you could get this were few and far between. Los Alamos National Laboratory, one of my stomping grounds, is one of the labs that advertised that they produced nanothermite. They were proud of it. And they have these data showing here's the properties as this stuff explodes is what it looks like. And so yeah, I contacted Los Alamos. I said we'd like a sample of your nanothermite to compare. Well, I didn't tell them this, but I wanted to compare with the nanothermite we found unexploded in the dust from World Trade Center 7. So yeah, it didn't all blow up, right? I mean, some of it was unexploded. That's why it was sitting in the dust, right? And so they would not, as you might guess,
Did
they
you
would
ever
not
have I have
even.
a really good question. What's the best explanation that anyone's ever told you? Like, because either A, you had some nanothermite fairies that came like the Tooth Fairy and dumped it on the World Trade Center and then
No, 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 no. You got to put it in the right places. You got to put it next to the steel. You can't just dump it on the building.
so there weren't any nano fairy thermites that like the Tooth
You got to
Fairy
put
that
it in the right place to knock out the steel columns. These things, they're well constructed. They're not hollow, by the way. I used to have a structural engineer told me, "Oh, the towers were hollow, like a can. You just step on a can and squash it." And I said, "They're not hollow. They've got columns in the center as well as perimeter columns.
yeah,
Here's a photo."
the
And
funny thing about
so,
the World Trade Center is there are videos that people have published and they've been taken down that are like from the 80s, like
yeah,
old 80s video, and they have them talking about how the World Trade Center is built to be withstanding to take planes and the
that's
heat
right,
from the
exactly.
plane and
Skilling,
an exterior wall and it's
yeah,
and then interior columns. I mean,
that's exactly right. They're very sturdy in the construction.
okay, so what we're going to talk about next is how this was received. Once you
Ah,
published this and all the blowback that you got and what happened at BYU. And but before we do that, I got a good video queued up that I'm going to show just as a little break, and it'll show some of these things like the fall of the tower, and we'll be able to talk about this.
I also have a video too, just so you know, Trevor.
um,
Look how that just cuts right through it.
right, at an angle. That's controlled demolition evidence, right?
However they put it.
I started looking at the molten metal. All three buildings, both towers in the rubble, in the basement areas, and building 7, there's these pools of molten metal.
Yeah.
You guys, 6 weeks after it collapsed,
You get down below and you see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry. Like
The molten steel.
why this is important is because the it's this whole thing we talked about 2,500 degrees Celsius to make it molten, right? And weeks after they cleared debris off, there was still a river of molten underneath the World Trade Center, you guys. And this isn't like somebody made it up. They got the firemen right here that just said they were there.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's
Yeah,
absolutely
that was one of the a very important point, Trevor, and one of the clues that I realized. Wait a minute. Here's the temperature to melt steel, and here's the temperature of the fires that you can reach with, burning furniture and paper in the building, plus fuel, yeah, from the plane, but that's only a limited area, and that burns up pretty fast, they said. So how do you bridge this gap? Where's the energy coming from to to make the steel, iron molten? And it turns out that thermite does that. It gives you molten iron. It looks like
Convenient.
molten steel, and it will melt steel. So now you've got mixed molten steel with the molten iron.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
that was
Okay.
one of the big clues, and I put that in a paper, and it was being peer reviewed and published, and BYU did not like that.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. What happened from BYU? Did you get a phone call
Uh,
of someone from one of the bosses? What can you talk about?
yeah. All right. So obviously they're under. This is also a lot of synapses firing, and I've written up some of this history, and I sent that to you. But let me see if I can summarize it a bit. So I'm talking about this in February of '06. Let me go back to September of '05. I'd already pulled together a lot of data. I wanted to have a peer review on the spot. So what I did is I called in professors from BYU campus and Utah Valley. They're welcome to come, right? And we had about 70 um, professors there. At least I didn't know them all, but I did not invite students to this one. This was a preliminary discussion, preliminary in the sense that I hadn't published yet. But I had researched the things we're talking about now: molten steel, molten iron, thermite. Actually, I hadn't talked about thermite, not back in September of '05. The collapse, the accelerated collapse of Building 7. So we had, we're accumulating data week by week, just everything, and it's all coming together. Controlled demolitions, what it looked like, for sure. Not fire bringing the World Trade Center 7 down, for heaven's sake. At accelerated, at free fall acceleration for 8 stories. Give me a break. That's fire? No, no, no. And we even had a government report analyze that and said, this can't be fire that causes the building to collapse this way, building 7. Anyway, so in September of '05, I called together this colloquium. And for about 2 hours, I went over the data with these professors, and they're asking questions, right? Hammering me. And that's called peer review. These are peers, and they're reviewing my data, and that's a type of peer review. Anyway, I asked them. We had to leave because there's another class coming in. This was in the Eyring Science Center, and big room there. And I said, look, I need to know from what you've seen, how many of you would agree that this needs to be researched, that this is important to research and scientifically established enough by these data that it merits further research. Now, every one of them, there was not one that dissented except one as a geology professor. And he said, no, I don't think so. But the next day, I saw him on campus and we just kind of met up on campus walking outside. But anyway, he said, I thought about it overnight, changed my mind. I think you better study this. This is worth studying. You need to study. So now that's no exceptions, no objections to my studying that from peers. So I went ahead, and at that point I started publishing online. Now, that's not a publication exactly, but it's again getting it out there so people can read it. And in February of '06, I gave a talk at Utah Valley University. What was it called back then? I forget. But anyway, Utah.
UVSC. That's where I went to.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. And great. Oh my goodness. They filled the auditorium, and then they started putting people in satellite rooms as we're discussing the evidence that we're talking about now, 9/11. And that received a lot of attention and BYU attention as well. And then subsequent to that, so in April, I spoke at, this is it was a symposium. It was held that year at Snow College. I went down there and gave another presentation, mostly professors, on the same topic. And that paper was published. It was a short paper. You might call it an abstract. Published in, the Utah Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Journal of the Utah Academy of Arts and Sciences, which they say is a peer-reviewed publication. So anyway, and I did have a peer review on that um, publication. Anyway, that is dated April of 2006, right? That was really my first publication. And boy, that was a solid, and you can't tell me that's a bad place to publish because a lot of BYU professors published in that journal. See, later they're telling me, we don't like where you published. I said, really? What's wrong with the Journal of the Utah Academy of Arts and Sciences? Oh, then no answer. Anyway, that was my first real publication, and then that I consider the first one. Then you proceed. Things are going along. I'm starting to get some pushback. There's a guy. I don't know if I should go into this too much, but he was really a private individual. But he kept writing to BYU administrators and to me saying, "Oh, you got to stop talking about thermite. It's very dangerous for you to talk about thermite. I mean, what if terrorists got a hold of this idea?" And I've said, thermite, you can buy it on eBay. It's like 100 years old. It's not a new idea. And yeah, it was used for demolition, and not very much, but it turns out, but yeah, it works. And it had been used for demolition. Anyway, he was warning me, don't talk about this. And I said, sorry, I'm a scientist, and furthermore, I'm a full professor of physics, and I think I'll go ahead and talk about it. We're learning, we're trying to get at truth here. But he was adamant, and this guy, I think, did have some influence on the administrators. At one point, he told me he had contacts in the federal government. He said, "I can get you shut down," and he said, "I can end your career." Now that is, I think, that's basically what happened. So I do think this guy had a lot to do with it, but not alone, obviously.
You
So
know, while
anyway,
So
we're
you,
huh? That was
sorry,
scary,
Chad,
a little bit scary, but I just,
yeah, I just wanted to say that while we're on this topic,
yeah,
I would never do anything to hurt myself. I'm very happy with my life, and anytime we
yeah.
talk about something like this, I always feel the need to say these things and to
Right.
say
I am not.
that I love both political parties. I think they're both great, and I hope we can all be friends.
Same here.
I agree, Chad. I
listen,
love that. I want
I
to
haven't even
emphasize that I am not suicidal. Okay, I'm not suicidal.
Yeah, me neither.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah,
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying
it's
there.
even better if you say, listen, I've learned this is a new thing. If you say, I love Hillary Clinton, I think she was the best Secretary of State.
Well,
It's
I'm
even
not going
better.
to lie. Now, Trevor, I am not going to lie. So sorry, not even going to lie. But
Dude,
so I kept talking and kept speaking, and this is where I went to one of Alex Jones's, at least one of his, more than one, as I recall, conferences on the subject of 9/11. And Alex was a very strong promoter of truth, and he wanted to talk about my research. And I was doing experiments with thermite, by the way, and eating through steel, showing how thermite eats through steel rapidly, and also looking at building 7, the way it collapses, and the accelerated motion, and so on, free fall. And arguing, by the way, with NIST, this is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And that got me into trouble at BYU too, because I'm arguing with NIST. And they say, look, this is a national lab. And I say, well, I'm sorry, they're making mistakes. They published it was a preliminary report on Building 7. And in this report, they're talking about, they say, Building 7 comes down at constant velocity. And I said, you guys are absolutely crazy. You didn't look at the data. Look at the video, second by second. Break it up into tenth of a second. It's accelerated motion. It's free fall, for heaven's sakes. I'd worked this out with a student long before this, and independently, David Chandler worked it out, and we both independently complained to NIST. They had an open hearing, on their preliminary report. And I sent them in an email and that's in a video somewhere. And I said, look, it's not constant velocity. You have made a tremendous error. You can't get away with this. The truth is, it's accelerated. It's free fall acceleration. Get it straight. And so in the final report, NIST corrected that. We got through to them. They said, yeah, it's accelerated. And then the next shoe is, okay, now how do you get free fall? It means you have to get all the structure out of the way. There's thousands of tons of concrete and steel in the way. How do you get free fall? They ignored that question. I must use a
They
swear word.
always do.
I must use a swear word. It's like, you guys, how can you get away with this? And then I'm asking NIST. So I'm back and forth with NIST. And they said, we find no evidence for explosives in these buildings. And I said, World Trade Center, the towers, and Building 7. And I said, well, did you look? And I actually got an answer on that. Here's their answer. And I published this in a paper. They said, NIST said, no, we did not look for explosives. And I said, well, how can you claim there's no explosives if you didn't look? And they said, well, if you're looking for something that isn't there, you're wasting your time. I said, come on, you guys.
It's the
That's not
same thing that
science. You can't.
this is.
I just, it's just like, are you kidding me? And you publish. I say we have no evidence for explosives. Oh, come on. You didn't even look.
Well,
Yeah.
to me, there has never been and cannot be a comprehensive forensic analysis because the whole site of Building 7, 1,
Well,
and 2
that's
was
another
just
point.
destroyed. They didn't take the time. They didn't do it. And so
That's right.
whenever you got a crime or a story, you got the who,
That's
what,
right.
where, and why. We know
Yeah.
where it happened because that's obvious. We know
Yeah.
somewhat what happened,
Yeah.
but we don't know the who.
Mm,
I mean, there's a lot of speculation and there's a lot of divergent opinions, but we kind of think that it's not the narrative story that's been perpetrated on the public, and the why. We
yeah.
don't really have a good who, and we don't really have a good why. We don't have a consensus on those topics, and it really was a crime against humanity. There's a crime against the United States, a crime against everybody involved, people that were falsely accused, and the whole ball of wax. And it's that way to this day. We don't have justice. We don't have criminal procedures taking place. We don't have any of the evidence in a cohesive manner. The engineers
Yeah.
for 9/11 Truth,
Yeah.
that they do a really good job on the what, but it's very, very sad, very, very disturbing. We're what, 24 years after the fact, and there's
Well,
still no
No.
official action that has been. I mean, the 9/11 Commission was a farce.
yeah.
And
That's true.
here's another thing. So
That's true.
let's give a benefit of a doubt because a lot of people they jump to the conclusion, oh, it was this organization or that organization that was behind it. What if it's like it could be anyone. It could be that the terrorists may have put this thermite in the building, right? Like we don't
Nanothermite,
know.
not
We don't know.
nanothermite. Yeah.
Right. But I think that there's a common thing where it's like once a narrative has been set to maintain the status quo, they go against any sort of evidence. It's the same thing we see happening with these weird artifacts found in the Americas. The Smithsonian, they admit that in Ohio, they found iron chest plates and axes. You can see this on the Smithsonian website, like 100 of them in a Native American burial ground, which we're not allowed to do research on anymore for whatever reason. But to keep the narrative that all these people in the Americas were uncivilized, they say, oh, well, it must have come from meteorites from outer space. That's where the iron came from. And then the iron came down from outer space and they hammered it into the shape of these iron chest plates. It's like,
Yeah, no, it's and MacGyver. I think your comment is perfect for segueing into this Tucker Carlson video. And well said, by the way. It was a crime, and the consequences and the trail of tears and the blood that cries out from the earth for these wars that we've waged, is very, very sad. And $8 trillion of our $36 trillion of national debt is just for that, as a consequence of these actions and the steps that we took as a country, which we thought we were justified in doing. It's horrifying. Now, the good news is the following: truth is coming out, and we do have a pretty big disclosure moment happening right now with the Trump administration. Like him or love him, the JFK files being released and a whole bunch of other things. And Tucker Carlson had on his episode a senator, and I want to show this quick little clip here from TikTok, and then we'll talk about it. And the thing that's cool to me is Tucker Carlson, who has probably one of the biggest credible news voices, is committed to do a 5 series documentary, and he's going to mention her. So,
Amazing. 5 days ago, and I've been thinking about it ever since. It's with a former congressman from Pennsylvania called Kurt Weldon. Kurt Weldon was a very significant figure in Washington 20 years ago. He was not some obscure backbencher. He was one of the most powerful Republicans in the Congress, about to take over the Armed Services Committee, until he asked questions about the official story on 9/11, at which point the Bush administration sent the FBI to his daughter's house, destroyed her life, never charged her with a crime, and effectively got Kurt Weldon bounced out of Congress. I haven't talked to him in 20 years. I didn't know exactly what to expect, but this conversation, the one you're about to see, raises far more questions than I ever anticipated. This is not a crazy person. These are not crazy questions. He makes no claims he doesn't have personal firsthand evidence of. When it ended, I asked him how many other officials who were in and around Washington during 9/11 have similar questions. And he said to me, as far as I know, all of them. And he's still in touch with a lot of those people. After this conversation, which again, we've been thinking about ever since, I thought it might be time to look a little more deeply into the 9/11 Commission report. Was it accurate? 9/11 changed the United States forever. Those of us who remember it, who lived through it, can tell you this was a different country afterward, completely different, and not a better country. And so there is no more significant historical event in the lifetimes of any living American than 9/11. And the fact that there are still outstanding questions about what exactly happened and why is troubling. Up until this point, most of the people who've addressed these questions are either crazy or seem slightly crazy. Now is the time for a sober look, not a wild-eyed, speculative look, but an honest look and honest conversations with people who participated in the response to that day, government officials. And so we're going to do that. We are planning right now a multi-part documentary series on 9/11. We hope to bring that to you as soon as we possibly can.
all right, that's a big deal. I thought this had a clip with the senator, but the thing that I think we benefited from going through Corona and COVID is we proved that you cannot trust the official narrative, no matter where it comes from.
Amen.
Right?
And read the Book of Mormon, Helaman chapter 6, Ether 8, etc., if you want further justification for not trusting the government narrative.
And I want to throw out, if you had COVID be a wake up for you and all of the lies that came with that, from the mask to the jab to the distancing to the fact that it was a man made, this is confirmed, whitehouse.gov, it was a man made virus. Okay. And, they were trying to tell us for 3 years that it was a bat who bit a pangolin in a market that
Yeah,
somebody.
it was a bat. It's not like there's the Wuhan lab of virology a mile
Yeah.
away that's studying coronaviruses or anything.
So if you believe and are now susceptible of like looking forward, I'm going to question everything. I challenge you to go back and to look at the narrative that was told to us after 9/11. I'm not saying that our government did it. And that's a lot of times what people hear when they say 9/11 was it. I'm saying that it's not what they told us happened. And if you want to do the very first search, just go look at Tower 7, World Trade Center, Tower 7, and start investigating that. And that's why we wanted to bring this episode up, is to talk about it, because as Chad said, and as Dr. Jones here has said, the Book of Mormon has a message in it to attune us and to wake us up in these last days. These are the days that Daniel saw. These are the days that John saw and wrote about. These are the day. These are the end times. These are the wars and rumors of wars days. And in the Book of Mormon, we have further insight into these secret combinations and how they're plotted behind our back when we're all is well in Zion. And so part of our goal and mission here at Zion Media is to bring some of these things to light, and not tell you these things as facts, but to tell you to explore them yourselves and look into these things, and not just put your blinders on or put your head in the sand. And so we are coming up on a break here where I've got to get going to a next meeting here. But before we go, I wanted to give anybody on here, David, MacGyver, Chad, like, if you don't have anything specifically, don't need to cover it. But if you have something you want to cover, but before that, Dr. Jones, I really appreciate you coming on and spending time with us here. We probably could have done 3-4 hours if we would have opened up into a lot of these equators.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
What
I just,
message do you have, or where do you
yeah,
kind of leave this with, like, your ending closing statement?
I'd like to reemphasize what you guys, Chad, and you guys have been saying about the Book of Mormon. It's my favorite book, and I have a testimony of the Book of Mormon, and so I know that it's true and that it warns us about secret combinations. So lately I've been studying, starting in 3rd Nephi 3. I recommend this, where Laconius and the Nephites are battling against the Gadianton robbers, secret combination. And they're in this struggle, and it becomes kinetic. It doesn't start out, it starts out as a war of attrition, but and they're, the good guys, the Nephites, are saving, which there's Lamanites with them, of course, at this stage. Anyway, I just want to say there's parallels to our day. But I just want, if you think Trump I think he's a good guy. I think he's on the side of Laconius, trying to expose and diminish the impact of the Gadianton robbers. We have Gadiantons today, and they are robbing us. And you see the fraud in the government and the misspent billions of dollars. But what I'm trying to get at is, as that Book of Mormon story progresses through 3rd Nephi, we have a period of peace, but the Gadiantons are going to come roaring back. According to where I get this is 3rd Nephi 7. I mentioned the chief governor of the land is assassinated, and the government, the national government there falls apart, and they break up into groups or tribes. Okay, that's 3rd Nephi 7 and 8. You get earthquakes, and all these things are foreshadowed in the Book of Mormon. And I'm reading it that way as a parallel to our day. So I'm preparing for a time when the Gadiantons will come back, and they're still with us. I don't mean, because in the Book of Mormon too, they're fighting the Gadiantons. But we have to be prepared for a day when we will need our food storage and our places of security.
Yeah, I totally believe that. And it's almost like we're fighting them off of taking control, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's just but we're almost to the point now where you can feel like we're fully infiltrated. And had they gotten their way with assassinating Trump, I feel like that was it for us. Like,
I
they
think
just
so too.
they would
And
have had full control.
then 3rd Nephi 11, we can look forward to that. Jesus will come. And, I want to testify of that. So that's the
Yeah.
good
No.
news.
One thing I would like to say is Ezra Taft Benson, he once said, the prophet, that there is no conspiracy theory in the Book of Mormon, only conspiracy fact. He also said that we are under condemnation for not taking the Book of Mormon seriously enough. And in President Nelson's biography, he re-emphasized that, talking about how profoundly it impacted him when Benson said this. And we're talking about all this stuff about, the Book of Mormon, talking about people crying from the dust for vengeance, and there's a lot of synchronicities. I mean, Revelations 9:11, and we know the Jews were heavy on numerology, talks about the destroying angel of the Lord. Um, so we do know that this Jesus guy is coming, and in Isaiah 63, it says that this guy is coming for vengeance this time.
Right.
So
I've got a question for you, Dr. Jones.
Yes.
The people who are responsible for sacking you from BYU, are they still in power? Are they still there? Because that academic injustice really makes me upset because
It, obviously, it was. Can I tell you something? They're all. I'll tell you, they're basically all gone. I think
mm,
they're all gone as far as retiring, moving on. But that was 2007, right? So that's 18 years ago, and I'm pretty sure they're all gone.
Well,
They're,
whoever replaced them, whoever's running Deseret Book and whoever's running the Bonneville Media and whoever's running BYU needs to have like a little reset of their woke
hey,
agendas.
all I know is that according to the Book of Mormon, at some point there's going to be some guy that shows up and takes some of these branches and then just prunes them and throws them into the fire. So I'm not too worried about it. I believe the prophecies of the Lord and that these things are going to happen.
I
yeah,
think we could. I mean, I'm. Thank you so much, Stephen Jones, for coming on, and
you.
I appreciate. I hope to do more episodes, at least of some of your carbon dating, and talk more Book of Mormon with you.
Yeah, the Brewers Cave thing could be
Brewer
fun.
Cave, yeah.
Oh yeah, we need to talk more
So,
about that.
all right, let's wrap this baby up, guys. We'd love you to subscribe to Zion Media if you're not already subscribed. This is a little different content, and we aim to grab different pieces and pull it in. Please like this video, and a quick plug for our sponsor, Oracle Code. We talked about Jews and numerology. The Oracle Code is a customized code based off of your date of birth that shockingly shows you a lot about your personality types, your spiritual gifts. And for a limited time, if you click on our bio, you can get a copy of your Oracle Code and a $200 song for half price. It's $99. And it's a customized song about you and these attributes. And like we've talked about, we've had so many people just emotionally moved by these songs. $99, that's expensive for a song, but we're getting people that get their song and then they're buying them for their spouse and their kids and their daughters, and they're like, these things are hits. They're going really, really well, and we encourage you to get access to it. The Oracle app will not be out until this fall, so the only way you can get your code is by getting a song with it. Thank you, Oracle, for your sponsorship, and for everybody tuning in to Zion Media. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll keep working hard. Give us ideas and suggestions of who you want to see on here and topics you want to hear. For myself, the real MacGyver, Latter-day Chad, David the Lion Douglas, and our esteemed guest, Dr. Stephen Jones. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.